Hello, and we are live. My name is Christian. I'm the host of the Disruptive Chef Entrepreneur Show. I know I say this at every episode, but we have a really cool guest for you guys today. We're going to start in a minute. Hello, and we are live. Welcome to the show, Chef Simon. So, before we let him introduce himself, I met Chef Simon through one of our channels, and he reminded me so much of me, 30 years in the industry, and he designated his career and his life to support the back of the house. So for that alone, Chef Simon, I'm a fan already. So welcome to the Disruptive Chef Entrepreneur Show.
Thank you.
So, Chef Simon, tell everybody how this came to be, and why you're a good-looking guy. You could do something else than podcasting or being a chef. So why did you get into this side of the industry?
A long story without making it too crazy is I started cooking at 16 and I fell in love with it. I dropped out of college. I was at UMass in Amherst for civil engineering, and I just looked around and went, God, these are just not my people. I am not meant to be. This is not where I am supposed to be. And I'd already been cooking for about a year. And so I just said, fuck it, here I go. And I quit school and spent a few months just screwing around. And my mom said, hey, you can do whatever you want, but you need to have a plan. You need to figure out what your plan is so that you can get educated about what you're doing so you can do it better. And so my simple plan was work in the morning, work at night, and work a third job sometimes. And I did that for years and just kept going and going. And I absolutely fell in love with food. And from day one, it was community. I don't know if I knew that way back when, but I always knew that I liked being around restaurant people, whether they be the servers or the cocktail waitresses or the cooks. It was always fun. It was always a place that I wanted to be, no matter whether I was in a hotel or a freestanding restaurant. And so I just kept going. And it took me from New Mexico to Florida. I found myself in Santa Barbara, California, and then in LA. I eventually met my wife in Santa Barbara. And gosh, then we moved, like I say, moved to LA and then San Francisco. I got to work in some great places, and then found myself up in Seattle here. And an amazing thing started to happen. As I got farther into it and I became a manager, a sous chef, and then a chef, this startling revelation for me, but I'm sure the rest of the world's going, duh, was, hey, this is almost as much or maybe even more about people than it is about food, right? Like food aspect can be taught day in and day out. The people aspect can be taught, but you have to have a certain love of it to do it well. And so I've always been a people person. I'm definitely a chatty person, so I enjoy interacting and being around people. So I started to pay attention to what it was that made the industry really zoom, right? Like, how do you develop people? How does that work? And gosh, I think back to 2012, I was in a place and I was just like, I was a sous chef farm. Cooks would just come to me, and 3 months later they'd be a supervisor, and then I'd get them up to sous chef. And then as soon as I'd get them really going and they were doing a great job of delegating and moving along, the company would come and say, I need a sous chef, and boom, and then I'd start over. And so I started promoting people to supervisor a little faster, just so I had more, like, almost excuse to develop them. And so fast forward to COVID, and I was a part of a company with 7 restaurants, and we were just scrambling. It was hand to mouth. It was every day was go, 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 because the good news is that we had really honed our off premise.
Yep.
So going into COVID it was traumatic, but it wasn't as traumatic as the restaurants that hadn't done that. And so we were blessed or cursed, whatever you say, as we rolled into 2021, that when the restaurants started to reopen, our problem was we didn't have enough people. We didn't have enough cooks. I didn't have enough dishwashers. I surely did not have enough sous chefs and chefs, because a company of 21 chefs and sous chefs, we had to repopulate 12 in 2021. And honestly, I think that sort of just broke me. I was like, this is just too much. I can't do this. I've been doing this for 33 years. I got parts of my body that are starting to fail. They are just not working the way they used to. I don't find this grind fun anymore. And so in 2022, I pressed the big stop and said, okay, I'm going to quit my job. And my wife was right behind me going, you should quit your job. You should get out of doing what you're doing, and you should find something else. And I had a couple of things in my brain. Number one, there's got to be a better way to do this. There's got to be a better way to make money and live and survive. That was number one. Number two is I spent 33 years doing this, and this is massive at this point. I want to stretch my brain. I want to use different pieces of my brain. But having said that, I quit my job. I sat around for 4 months and I thought about who I wanted to be when I grew up again, right? How do I want to affect the world? How do I want to interact with the world? And I realized, well, I've been a chef my whole life. I don't know that that identity can go away yet. But years ago, I had this concept in my brain that restaurants are machines, and you have to treat restaurants to some extent
Mhm.
machine. You got to keep them well lubricated. You got to feed. You got to have good inputs. And so the idea of Culinary Mechanic came, and it made a lot of sense to me that if we worked on the systems, the very non-glamorous side of things, that you could help people make money. And so there's a good strong piece of that. And then I also realized that to some extent, if you treat the people aspect a little bit like a machine, then you're honing a machine as well. And so before we got to recording, you mentioned the term self-leadership. And I thought, gosh, I always just say leadership, but boy, that makes a lot of sense to me, because I think that if people don't know how to manage their time, and they don't know how to delegate, and they don't know how to do some real fundamental leadership and management things, then they stumble and fumble. And then we get that instance where we have well-renowned restaurants closing after 18 months, which is nothing more than the worst thing in the world.
I absolutely love the idea of the mechanic side, and I love the name. I think it's really catchy. I love the whole thing. So the culinary mechanic, for me, we really resonate with that because it is mechanics.
Yeah.
And for me, you sound very much like, as we started this, is I have very good friends. They're amazing chefs. They all started restaurants, and 9 out of 10 fail. And I don't think it is they fail because they don't make good food, because they don't know the rest of the mechanics which goes with it. And that's, being HR, being somebody who builds a restaurant and managing all of that. So for me, I think that's missing. And I think you kind of bring this in, and I'm really fascinated by that. So how is that going for you right now?
It's going okay. I would say 2023 was a pretty good year for my first year as sort of in the consulting advising space. Coaching, I had a few clients, a few months where I was like, wow, this is great. Honestly, 2024 is a little slower. And so as I approach people and I start to talk to them, they kind of give me that look, and I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, I'm really unstable right now. And I said, okay. And I think very much like therapy, I think people in self-help, unless they are ready to do the work, it doesn't matter how much I can bring to them. They have to be ready. And so I think that there's constant little murmurings of economic contraction and this and that. And so I just decided, okay, if I don't have as many clients, that's why I started my podcast. This will pay dividends at some point, and I
Yeah.
got to get through the first 50, 20, whatever. I got to get through the lower ranks of episodes and understand where I am.
Yeah.
It's just iteration, right?
I love that. And I think you have the right mindset. So for me, we I think about 100 episodes in. So that's our number. And we don't expect anything of it. So the only thing we want to do is we want to serve the industry and bring some really interesting, cool people to the industry and to our listeners. Because I'm a big believer, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And
Yeah.
so if we put the stuff out there and just put it out there into the marketplace, it only takes one or two right people to hear what you have to say and resonate with that. And I think everything else is just gravy from there. And for me, as we got to know you a little bit, I love your philosophy of the whole done with versus the done for. Can you talk to us a little bit? Where did that come from? And how does it serve your clients currently? The whole emphasis on done with versus done for, I think it's a really cool approach. So where did that come to be, and how does it service you and your clients?
Well, it came to be because very much like we look at who you want to be, you have to look at who you don't want to be. And earlier in my career, I saw restaurant consultants come into hotel kitchens, come into restaurant kitchens, or restaurants in general, and they would come in and they would just throw down these massive action plans. And I've got the program for you. And yeah, we'd see some change, and couple things would happen, and they would be all over everything. And then somebody would flip a switch, and they were gone. And
Mhm.
Never, not once did I ever see somebody go, hey, do you fully understand what we've discussed, what the changes that we've made? Do you believe in this? Do you understand this? Do you is this something you want to fight for? Not once. And so I realized that's what a typical classic consultant is for me. And that's none of what I want to be.
Yep.
What I want to be is the little birdie on the shoulder that, it's funny. You talk about consultants and you talk about coaches, and I'm not even fond of coach so much because I'm more than a coach, is in that I bring 33 years in the field experience to what I do. And so I can be a whole lot more than just the guy who coaxes the greatness out of you, right? I can help do that, no doubt about it. But I think advisor really is the word that has been the one that helps me wake up in the morning and vibrate with energy. So done with means that we're going to work together, and some of the answers are going to come out of your mouth as the client, not just out of my mouth. And I think that that's the coaching aspect. And I think more than all of it, the most important thing to me is that it is sustainable, right? And I'm not talking about like compostable plates. I'm talking about an action that we can have repeat over and over and over. And it doesn't kick our ass. And it's not such a convoluted system that nobody really understands it. Just the opposite.
Yep.
It should be simple. It should be relatable. The employees should go, yeah, that fucking makes my life better. That's what I'm aiming for.
I love it. I so connect with that, because
that for me is what Done With is about. It's about sustainability, right? When I leave from a client's project or engagement or whatever you want to call it, I generally feel pretty good that I've engaged the key players and they understand how to continue to teach what we've started. And that's what matters, right? It's not just them learning. It's about how they are understanding to teach.
I so resonate with that, and it's my honest belief that repetition is the mother of skill, and there's nothing more true than in the food service industry. And I also feel a lot of the consultants, because by the way, I feel the same way as you do around consultants, that there's so much information coming down from such a high level where people forget, or they forget, that sometimes the guy working the station over there has no idea how to calculate food cost, and breaking it down to the basics, because at the end of the day, food service is a learnable skill, and training needs to happen all the time. And I love that whole concept, doing it with you versus done for you. So we also, before we started this, we talked a little bit about technology. How do you feel technology overall in what you do and how you support your clients? How do you leverage technology, and how do they kind of adopt technology? Because a lot of my restaurant friends, I have one of them, super successful. He still does paper and pen. He has no system, and he does really well at that, but that's what he does. And you said it earlier, I think our industry is more than any other industry. The chef says, oh, I will do it by myself. I don't ask any question. I don't show any fears, like military. I'm going to do it all by myself. So my question to you is then, how does technology change the way you advise you're supporting restaurants? And what are some other tools you recommend for them?
Well, that's a lot of question, Christian. Number one, like what we're doing right now, right? Zoom calls, that stuff changed my life, right? In COVID, having to learn to do a Zoom call to do my one-on-ones with my chefs, all of a sudden made it such that I was now in front of my computer, and that I could type a little note to them as we're talking, or set a reminder for myself. And I was able to, for me on this side, I was able to be a whole lot more productive than just sitting across the table from them. Right. And so I was able to have a strategy so that I could be coaching them and guiding them to better results. So for number one is virtual and Zoom. Right. I operate Culinary Mechanic as a virtual advisory. I'm not going to restaurants and seeing how they're running. I'm having to do a little bit of trusting and having to ask some good questions. But it allows me to work with the chefs one-on-one. I just finished an engagement with a guy, with a winner in Canada. He's in the Canadian Rockies, right? I've never been in his restaurant, but I have a good sense of what's happening there after talking to him for a few hours. So that's number one. I think number two, I'll give you the example of an operator I worked with, and there was no chef per se, but it was a guy who was doing Lebanese food from Lebanon. He has 4 restaurants and he's cranking up Zero shawarma. They're doing the vertical spits, the whole bit. He's got a commissary, and you're talking, and I'm looking around this place. I'm like, man, this commissary is set up. Like, you've got some great tools here. Why am I here? And then he goes, well, I'll tell you the truth. And I said, please do, And he goes, I open my books every Wednesday with my accountant. And every week I look. And when I look and the number is bigger than it was last week, I close the book. It was but about 5 weeks ago I opened it and it wasn't getting bigger. And then 4 weeks ago, it wasn't getting bigger. And then 3 weeks ago, it wasn't getting bigger. And 2 weeks ago, it wasn't getting bigger. So I asked a friend who I should call or what I should do. And they said, well, do you know why your food cost is rising? Because that's what we identified. And I said,
Yeah.
And they said, no. They said, well, have you costed your menu? And he said, no, I never thought to do that. They didn't have written recipes. 15 years. So my answer to you is we went in, we costed all of their recipes. We got a menu engineering done. He saw the stars, he saw the dogs, he saw the plow horses, all the stuff, right? He saw every animal you want. And I said, if you do this, we can then get going faster. He went from some archaic POS system from the late 1900s, right? He put toast in, all of a sudden data's coming through. He's starting to work on the invoicing aspects. And I think that the answer to your question really lies in this. If you want to grow, if you want to be able to step away someday, if you want to be able to teach it, if you want the thing to keep going, then technology is the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, sure, I can teach somebody else to do something on paper, but the reality is if you want to further the business so that the business makes you money rather than you making all the money by your blood, sweat, and tears, you have no choice, right? And every day, and as we talked about just a little while ago, every day the technology does this quantum leap thing. We're in this amazing time where, believe it or not, video podcasting is at its infancy. And the technology is kind of but I think that in 3 months and in 6 months and in 9 months, it's going to get better. So I'm a big advocate of find the piece of technology that works for you, right? And don't, like, just because it's technology doesn't mean it's great, right? I think it's about finding the right one and finding enough, because as time goes by, 2-3 years, you can upgrade, you can change over, and every day the changeover thing gets a little easier.
Yeah.
So I think it's just get started.
So for us, when we work with our clients around technology, we always ask the question, which one will you use? Because the best technology is the one you use. We can give you great technology if you ignore it or don't use it. It doesn't matter how good it is. So what are you willing to use, and what are you willing to learn with? That's for us was always the biggest struggle. You and I in the technology all the time, and people which are not familiar with that, it's scary to them, and they feel like they're losing control. And for me, the question is, which one are you willing to use? Because there's so much great technology out there, and the best is the one you use. So if you don't use it, it doesn't matter how good the technology is. It will not help. So looking at the restaurants you work with, what do you see are the biggest challenges for restaurants? Not just what they're facing today, is what do you think is that one thing when you walk in and it's sometimes you always say some of the restaurants are one skill away to totally have a different outcome, or they one tool away, or one strategy away. What do you think that one thing is you see the most often in today's restaurants?
I truly believe it is the acceptance that the workforce is truly, it's not, it's changing, but it's changed. Right? Like, we're in that place where you can't keep doing what same thing and expecting the same results. That's great, except you got to change, because the people aren't accepting of what has been, right? There's not a, like, you and I are chefs of a different era. The stuff that I went through, nobody's putting up with that shit anymore. Right, the stuff that I did to get my station, like, to move up and go to be the guy who's like, I'm doing hot apps today, but if I kick ass, I get to work on the grill tomorrow. Right, like, I had to outwork everybody in my path, and I just don't see that is, quite honestly, it's not healthy. Some of that stuff that we did is not healthy, and it's not great. And so I think that the biggest thing, that one behavior, is the acceptance
Mhm.
that it's time to relook at how we do things, right? It's time to evolve.
I was always a big believer in my career. Try to find the right person for the right job. More important than the right tool for the right job is the right person. And an example is we had in one of our restaurants, we make good salads, but all of a sudden the salads became just significantly better. And we were like, what happened? They said, oh, she's now making the salads because she eats salads 80% of the time. Sounds amazing. And then as we started going into the plant-based direction, how come all of a sudden it changed? Because if you want to have good plant-based product or on a menu item, hire somebody who has a plant-based lifestyle because it will change everything for you.
Yeah, they
And
care.
and it's different. And if you have a station which is gluten-free, have it run by somebody who is gluten-free or has somebody whose family member is gluten-free because they look at it totally different. And for me, I see this the biggest struggle in restaurant because the day where you got a vegetable pasta primavera as a vegetarian dish are over because people will not come back if you give him that. So I think you need to do a lot better today than you have done in the past. So you've been in the industry as long as I have. So what advice would you give an aspiring chef coming into the restaurant or an inspiring restaurateur who wants to embrace innovation, stay ahead of the industry?
This is the advice I give, quite honestly, to anybody coming into the industry, but it is this: for everything you learn, teach. Everything
Yeah.
you're teaching, everything that is coming along, teach. And if you're a leader, if you're already a leader and you're trying to be an innovator, pay attention to how you teach.
Mm-hmm.
And in my restaurants, my last couple restaurants, my biggest thing was I'm not just going to teach you, but I'm going to teach you how I want you to teach the rest of them.
I
Because
love that.
all of a sudden I didn't have compliance, I had culture. When I started
Mm-hmm.
to do this, everybody was treating others with respect, and we weren't going, "Oh, that's a stupid question." Instead, we were all helping each other because everybody figured out that if we all work together, life went a whole lot better, and those crushing shifts were just not quite so soul crushing and maybe just physically crushing, right? But I think that it's really about calling back to the fundamentals of what I remember as chef culture in the 90s and early aughts, around like, this is how we do it, and this is why, and that's what makes great restaurants. Well, that's what makes great businesses, and that's what makes great organizations, is the expansion of influence and knowledge,
Mhm.
right?
I love
So teaching, but not just teaching how and what, but why. And let's teach how it should be taught so that the culture expands.
I
So yeah.
absolutely love that, and I can talk to you forever. But before we wrap up today's episode, so first I need to promise you come back for 2.0. And
You
before
got it.
we sign up for the day, tell our listeners where can they learn about a little bit more about culinary mechanics.
All right. So we got culinarymechanic.com. There's all you can go on to YouTube and type in Culinary Mechanic, and there's a YouTube channel, Apple Podcasts, Culinary Mechanic Podcast. Let's see, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon. There's about a half a dozen more, but those are the big ones. I'm on LinkedIn, Simon, and the last name is Zatyrka, Zatyrka. I'm on Instagram as Simon Zatyrka. Gosh, I'm pretty easy to find if you're
Yeah.
willing to look
Uh,
for a guy with the last name Z.
And we will have all of your information in the show notes. I want to say thank you for being here today and giving us a glimpse behind what culinary mechanics is. The next time we come back, we need to have a little bit of deeper conversation on how it actually impacts the clients you have. But before we go, we do a little something. I have rapid fire questions here for you, and
Okay.
our team picked 3 for you. So
Okay.
don't think about it. Answer quick. See what you think.
Yeah.
What comes to mind. Before we do this, if you haven't done so, to our listeners, please join the Disruptive Chef Entrepreneur Club, which is the disruptivechef.club, which is our front row seat. You get all the great latest news and insights from what we're doing, and you get a glimpse on who we're bringing on for our new guests. So with that, rapid fire question. Question number 1, Chef Simon, is what is an ingredient, if given the power to ban it forever, what is the ingredient you would ban and why?
Oh gosh. I think any GMO. How's that?
I love that. But GMO is flavor. You just made a few people upset. So question number 2, if we're given the same power and you can ban a dish forever, what dish needs to go away tomorrow?
I don't know. That's a hard one because I just like all food. So
Okay.
we're gonna have to say pass because I don't want to ban any
No
food.
worries. And last question is, what is a kitchen gadget you feel is way overrated?
Way overrated.
Yes.
There's that little rolly thing there you put the garlic in. I'm like, come on, man. Like, mash your garlic. You gotta get the oils going.
Are
You know
you
what I'm talking
hating
about? It looks like a cannoli and you put the garlic in it and you roll it and all of a sudden the peel. I'm like, that's cheating. You can't do that. That's cheating.
That's too funny. Chef Simon, we really appreciate you being here today. So thanks a lot. And to our listeners, if you have done so, please check out Chef Simon. It's amazing what he does for the industry. Also amazing to see how he nurtures his group. So if you haven't done so, again, make sure you go into his ecosystem. So with that, Chef Simon, I want to say thanks for being here today. Until next time, remember, disrupt your kitchen, fire up your career, stay hungry for change. I'm Christian New, disruptor, chef, entrepreneur, host. I'm signing off. Chef, thanks for being here today. And to our listeners, be the change, be the challenge, and be the chef who sets the world on fire. So with that, guys, thanks a lot. Until next episode, stay disruptive, everybody.